It's Wellness Wednesdays. It's Wellness Wednesdays, and I apologize in advance if I cough during this video. I was getting better with that, and then one of my neighbors decided to burn something in their backyard. It was like this fog rolled in. There was so much smoke, and it smelled like old wood burning. And what's one of the things I'm allergic to? Certain types of trees. You know what happens when someone takes something you're allergic to and sets it on fire? Yeah, I'm kind of back to square one with the coughing and the snot and all that stuff. So bear with me. We're talking about imposter syndrome, and I'm going to struggle through this. Not fun. But if you like Wellness Wednesday, I know a lot of people out there that you guys like Wellness Wednesday. Support Wellness Wednesday. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/Leanna K. Wellness Wednesday is definitely one of my favorite segments every week. And my take on imposter syndrome is going to be kind of spicy. So strap in. Imposter syndrome is an interesting thing to look at from a mental health and wellness perspective, because unlike a lot of things in terms of psychology and research and whatnot, the research in a lot of things, a lot of the research was weighted towards studying men. With imposter syndrome, the research is, I think, artificially weighted towards studying women. And at one point, this wasn't true. At one point, I think there was a difference between, a wider difference between men and women regarding imposter syndrome. And I will define what it is in a second. I'm just doing a preamble right now. But from my experience and talking to people, I mean, the people who asked me to do this video were all men. The gap has narrowed in this particular gender gap is narrowed, and this isn't, we want the gap to narrow with fewer women feeling like they have imposter syndrome, not more men having imposter syndrome. And we have to start going, okay, why is that? It was originally called imposter phenomenon back in 1978. The founding study focused on high achieving women. And, you know, despite all these accomplishments, these women, they had great academic achievements, tons of professional accomplishments. They still believe that they've just sort of fooled everyone into thinking they're competent, and they're actually not that smart. If you're going, oh, that kind of describes me, you're not alone. My take on imposter syndrome is not that imposter syndrome means people have to do exercises and improve themselves. That's the standard take on imposter syndrome. Tell yourself your achievements in the mirror. I'm not a fan of that particular kind of self-talk exercise. This isn't the video get into why. I personally think they backfire because you feel ridiculous talking to yourself, and so you end up feeling more pathetic and more impostery. I can go on my own story and then my observations of others and say that I don't think imposter syndrome is a weakness or failing in the individual. I think imposter syndrome is a community or cultural failure wherein everything from educational systems to family of origin to workplace environments to chosen social circles are telling people you're not good enough over and over and over again. The constant emphasis on what you're lacking in, what you need to do better at, and not enough focus on, no, you have these strengths, right? Or taking things that are actually strengths, or at the very least double-edged swords, and turning them exclusively into negatives. And this is the culture we live in, right? On the one hand, on the more right-wing side of the equation, we have this whole concept of sin, right? We all know what that does to people. But then there's a similar concept of sin. And it didn't start off this way, but privilege on the left has become sin. It's the same thing. You're born terrible and, you know, need to atone, need to do all these things to get into, you know, whatever eternal reward or current reward or just not being canceled, right? It's all the focus on what we suck at, what we're lacking in, what we do badly. And that's a great way to constantly feel like shit about yourself. Now, this is where things get complicated. Because if you've been brought up, if you come up in a really invalidating environment, it is really hard to lay down those original flagstones, or the original pathway to self-validation, to feeling like you have an inherent sense of worth. And an inherent sense of worth is not based on achievement, though achievement can help you find it, because achievements are external to an extent. An inherent sense of worth is just that. It's inherent. It's internal. It's, even if you get nothing accomplished today, you still matter as a sentient being, right? And this is where this obsession with achievement becomes an issue. Because the thing about achievements is they are, in many ways, forms of external validation. And they're important. I mean, you have to have something to measure yourself against, right? But after a while, you're supposed to self-actualize and take your life experience and not just do well, but make mistakes and learn from them. And I think that make mistakes and learn from them is the part that's increasingly broken down in our societal equation. And this is where I think imposter syndrome has come from, and why we used to see it overwhelmingly in women, but now we're seeing it in a lot more men. It's not just because they haven't measured it previously. It's because we know from past studies that women, and these are massive generalizations, right? Women are more likely to see value as innate, and men are more likely to see value as something that is achieved and earned. Now, more and more, because of the focus on identifiers, people are getting the sense that worth, value, good and evil are actually innate. You know, that feeling that, well, if you're a white, straight, cisgender dude, WSCM, right, you're inherently evil. I don't care if people believe that that is the message that's being sent. That is the message that a lot of guys have internalized, okay? Meanwhile, you've got, say a guy is straight, cisgender, and male, but he's black. Well, we know the shitty messaging that they're getting, right? You know, you're a woman instead of a man. Oh, well, there's that whole, and everybody is getting these buckets and buckets and buckets of invalidation based on the very kind of streams of thought and systems that were designed to lift people up. What it's just done is made everyone neurotic, right? Everybody is so focused on not making a mistake instead of learning from mistakes. And those are such different paradigms. Never making a mistake means you live in a constant state of terror. Learning from your mistakes is how you grow and how you build that sense of accomplishment, achievement, that you've earned it. Because you can compare when you totally screwed up and didn't earn it and you own that, to, no, I did really well this time. I deserve this, right? You can't be able to embrace your success and feel like you've really earned the success if you've never tasted failure. And too many people rise through systems and, one mistake, you're done, right? Or they never make that catastrophic mistake, and so they don't have anything to compare the success to. Hopefully that's making sense, because I've worked in a lot of very rough and tumble industries. There's a lot of imposter syndrome in media just because everything is so highly subjective. And, let me tell you, those first few jobs, they are such whirlwinds. Everything happens so fast. You don't get a chance to take a breath. And then the negativity just wallops you. There is so much jealousy. There is such lack of support systems in media, because it's a bad kind of competition instead of a healthy kind of competition. But this isn't just media anymore. This is pretty much every company. Everything is, there's no job security. You're constantly getting afraid of getting fired. There's all these corporate policies. Nobody can use judgment. There's a lot of unhealthy work environments out there. And that's what I think imposter syndrome actually is. It's not a failing in the individual. Nobody chooses to feel like an imposter. It's a failing of the system that is surrounding that individual. Because imposter syndrome isn't the same as arrogance or insecurity. It's a very, very specific thing in that, the examples given in the articles about this stuff are people like Sheryl Sandberg and Sonia Sotomayor and people like that. They've talked about experiencing imposter syndrome, even though these are extremely accomplished individuals. Now, okay, we know Facebook is toxic, so I don't think there's no easy way to learn to embrace power. It is especially historically difficult for women because the feminine state is not associated with feeling powerful. But again, the way culture has gone, I can't think of anybody that has a reason to feel empowered right now, right? Everybody's evil for some reason for someone. How is anybody supposed to be able to stand in their power and go, yep? And you have to accept your failures. You have to be accountable, but you also have to stand in your power to not have imposter syndrome. And I laid those out in that specific order for a very important reason. Because you have to make mistakes first. Somebody who's never had to deal with failure is not powerful. You may inflict yourself on others, but you're not powerful. You're still flailing through. It's making mistakes and learning from them that gives you that sense of, first of all, how to make a mistake. Second of all, how to accept mistakes in other people. And then being accountable. Being accountable is not the same as feeling shame. Being accountable is, yeah, I could have done better there. And I wish there were more examples of real accountability out there. So many of our public figures and so much of our media glorifies people ducking responsibility for what they've done. The fact that every female-led Marvel franchise is a "who am I" story. The big triumphant moment is, I know who I am. fucking Christ, you have an arm cannon, or you can do magic, or you just killed a bunch of dudes, or you're a super spy, and you don't know who the fuck you are? Seriously? We had to get to the end here? And even then, you really don't get the sense these women know who they are, because you don't figure out who you are in a neat little 2-hour, 3-hour arc, right? That's a lifelong thing, because people change. Who you are, I'm not who I was 10 years ago. I'm not, in 10 years, I will be a somewhat different person. And that's the fun thing about being in the media as long as I have. People can go back and check what I was doing at like 21. Wow, that's fun. It's a Shondy and Fun Shondy Saints Row phenomenon, right? But that forced me to deal with evolution, right? The nice thing about that was also seeing the evolution, like being able to go back and see the stuff I did when I was younger and go, oh man, that was naive. Good. You want to look back on what you did and think it was naive, right? You do. That's wisdom. Not, oh my God, I had all these goals. I've got whatever. Life is what happens when you're making other plans. But then it's that power thing. When I was on television, I probably had more fame, but less power and influence. One of the things I really had to learn with the internet and having, a modestly sized platform and a decent social media following is that there is a certain amount of power in that. I used to take the crowdfunding stuff I did and compare it to these ones that got, millions and millions of dollars, and because they got a ton of help from friends in the press and all that stuff, and they had marketing companies and more money going in. But I can manage to raise decent, tidy little sums and get projects made. That's power. That's an amount of power. And that's not a fluke. I've done it enough times that it's not a fluke. I know what I'm doing. The first 3 were terrifying. Now that I'm on 6 or 7, all of a sudden it's like, I know how to do this. But that came with recognizing that not taking a shot is not giving away your shot. There's a difference, right? Hamilton thing, I know. But in sports, it's always take the shot, take the shot. But sometimes you actually should pass the ball. Sometimes, you don't want to be a greedy player. And that was the interesting thing about the Hamilton character development, and look how it eventually went, right? Accomplished a bunch of stuff, but died after a duel. Dying after a duel is probably not like dying young after a duel is probably not life goals. Over a dumb fucking thing is probably not life goals for most people. And there's nothing wrong with not wanting to give away every shot. But I can't believe I'm going to say this. Life is not basketball. I love basketball. But in life, you have an option C. You can pass the ball to another player. You can take the shot. Or you can hang on to the ball for a little while. I mean, in basketball, you can run the clock, right? You can run the shot clock. Sometimes that's the right play. Just take a moment and make choices consciously. And when you start realizing that it's okay to hang on to the ball sometimes, it is also okay to pass the ball to somebody else. It is also okay to take the shot. All are 3 equally valid plays. You just got to decide which one's which, and that comes with experience. That's when you start clearing away the idea that you don't belong somewhere. Or you haven't earned it, right? You're just stupid and faking it. The thing uniquely about at least my experiences in gaming, and maybe this was a net positive for me long term because I stuck with it, is that I actively had people telling me, no, you can't do this. You were born in the wrong decade. You're the wrong gender. You have the wrong work experience. You're both overqualified, based on your production experience, but you have no game credits and it's too late to start. Flat out told that by multiple sources, right? You got to sort of take that and figure out, well, are you going to quit or are you going to find a way? And again, both are valid. Sometimes the right call is moving on to something else, the way I did with TV, because I didn't enjoy the television industry. A good piece of advice that I got from someone in the industry was basically, on a film you want to work on great projects, but on television you want to work on with great people, because it's just such a grind, and just too many people in the environments I worked on weren't great people. They were the opposite of great people. Perhaps if I'd worked in more supportive environments, I would have stayed with it. But I also just don't love television the way I love games. I never have. Television was something I had an opportunity to get into, so I took it, but I didn't grow up idolizing TV stars. I grew up thinking video games were the coolest freaking things in the world, possibly in the universe, right? And so I felt like I deserved, I owed it to myself to take the shot and possibly fail. And it required a lot of building up through the back door. It was years and years and years of establishing myself. And yeah, it took longer than, somebody who gets hired right out of college and gets that entry-level job and gets paid like shit and possibly sexually harassed. But that's the right way to do it, right? You start young and you just go through it. And this is where I think some of the imposter syndrome comes from, is if you're not checking those boxes on career paths, a lot of people think you're doing it wrong somehow. And why? This isn't a family circus. Trace Billy's path through the yard. That's a dated reference. I'm aware. I said that ironically. It's all sort of drilled in that it's the right school and the right people and the right networking and the right. There's no right or wrong to these things. I mean, Zuckerberg didn't finish Harvard. He founded Facebook. The guy's a dolt of a human being, but, he made something that may be evil, but he made something. And this is where we start getting really complicated of, okay, we have all these things interconnecting, working together, relationship with power. One of the things you guys told me was, you perceive me to have a certain amount of power, and that matters. And I have to respect that, even if I don't necessarily, compared to other much bigger YouTubers, I don't feel like I have that much power. But when someone's telling you, no, you do, you should listen to them. You shouldn't, at least I decided not to cling to false humility. I decided to say, yeah, clearly I do have some power here. The sheer number of people who hate me in this industry is an indication that I at least have some influence. Let's start acting like it. But there's an example of, a positive approach to adversity, right? If I scare people enough that they want to get rid of me, I got to be doing something right. There has to be some power influence there, and I own that. Now, I could only do that because I was more comfortable making mistakes than the average person. I'm a perfectionist. I'm very tough on myself, but I recognize mistakes are going to happen, feel bad about it, then get back up and keep going, right? Was it one thing that led to another, No, all these little sliders or XP gauges or things like that, they all sort of happened incrementally. Almost like building stats in like the old Quest for Glory game, where doing one thing built this stat, doing another. Instead of skill points you plug in when you level up a character in an RPG, life's more like that. You do something, you develop that skill. You do other things and develop that skill. Now, anybody who knows is build characters that way, that in order to really do cool shit in games like that, you do have to have core stats, essential stats, and then you have to have dump stats. Everybody's got a dump stat. And I think imposter syndrome comes from focusing on your dump stat instead of focusing on your core strengths, the skills that are essential to what you do, right? In video games, we know that, if you want to be a fighter, you pile points into strength. You want to be a rogue, you pile points into dexterity, wizard intelligence, cleric wisdom, bard charisma, so on and so forth. We don't worry about, say, the, intelligence of a D&D fighter in terms of a core stat. If you want to have an interesting enhanced experience, you can experiment with a high wisdom character that's not a cleric, or, a wise warrior, elder statesman kind of thing. But that's not essential to succeeding in that role. And yet in real life, we treat people like you need all of those stats. You need all the special from Fallout. You need all the GURPS. You need all the, strength, fortitude, dexterity, charisma, wisdom, this, that, the next thing, and there's even a fucking luck stat and star. People want all the things. They want the perfect score, and that is not how you build a character. Not in RPGs, not in life. You have to play to your strengths and work with other people who have strengths that you don't have, but have enough of kind of a worldview alignment that you challenge each other without creating an echo chamber, without being at loggerheads too much. And that's more art than science. That takes not just trial and error and just trying to work with a bunch of different people and see what works, but also an element of maturity where you have to be comfortable enough with yourself through all this other stuff that you're willing to go, I don't know this. Who does? And it's amazing the minute you feel comfortable going, I don't know, let's find someone who knows, how that imposter syndrome starts to ebb away. When you feel comfortable either getting an answer wrong so you can learn, or, admitting you don't know. One, it's a marker they're in a supportive environment, but also it shows you're growing as a person, and that's the beginning of the end of crippling imposter syndrome. So sometimes you have to start there. Just make a deal with yourself that when you don't know something, you're going to admit you don't know. Even if people treat you like you're stupid. That's a defining character trait in Princess Sparkle Muffin. One of her taglines is, I don't get it. She's comfortable enough with herself because she's a princess and her parents loved her, even if they were smothering, right? But she's comfortable enough saying, I don't get it. And that's a central core tenet with her. That's a central character point with her. And that's part of where her strength comes from. That's its own quiet form of confidence. So Wellness Wednesday this week is about, the Tao of Princess Sparkle Muffin. Bless. Don't forget about the Kickstarter that's happening. That wasn't an intentional plug. It just sort of ended there. This is probably a bigger conversation. Ask your questions, drill down. There was a lot there. So I'm interested in what you guys want to see more of a focus on. And until then, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, and the crowdfund. Please support it. Thanks for watching.